Thank you everyone for being curious about this topic. Software is solved. Are we going to be okay? My name is Jenny, and I run a group called Puzzle Exchange. Usually, the topic has to do with tech and like some kind of like mental health related topics. And I am so excited to bring this panel. And the idea of starting this is mostly from me starting to vibe code, and that honestly changes how I basically how I live, like the lifestyle. Right now, I live in the terminal and I open up. Like this is basically my interface of the computer. Without further ado, I want to introduce the panel. And so Ryan, I met Ryan in Vibe Coding Night. He works at the tower. He runs bunch of Vibe Coding Nights that's super, it's very open where you learn basically a topic each session, and then you get to really use your creativities in those events. And I learned basically everything from his event. And he's probably the smartest engineer in this tower. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Uh, hey guys, my name is Rayyan. I have a background in chemical engineering from another country, Pakistan. That's where I grew up. And I started programming while I was at college, and I kind of foresaw this current paradigm, and a little bit further out in 2017, and I had some big visions for my grand plan and life in the universe. And I've been doing that for the last 7, 8 years. And before LLMs were even a thing, I was working at a small startup here, doing research in AGI and building agents. A lot of my work in the interim has been around AI and AGI, and now I have an opportunity to kind of harness that information and help people reframe the way they look at AI and actually use it for good. I run the applied AI floor here, and we have a bunch of projects with robotics, biosynthesis. We are shipping code. We are helping startups be able to have a 100x advantage over other startups and a bunch of other cool stuff.
John? I met John actually last week from Philosopher Club. He's a big thinker, and it's actually very interesting that the last book that I read in the Philosopher Club is about how the witch hunt is influenced by the rise of capitalism, and because the rise of AI is also changing a lot of the dynamic, and I feel like that's somehow ironically very.
I'm John. I'm actually a software engineer, but I hold a degree in German literature where I studied mostly 19th and 20th century philosophy and poetry. Yeah, I also write on my spare time. And yes, we were reading about the witch hunts. I don't know. I mean, the relevancy of the witch hunts is perhaps that in that text, the implication is that in a moment of change, the rise of capitalism, there has to be a sort of a stage where the human is disciplined in order to conform to that new system that is emerging. Perhaps that is relevant to AI when we're thinking about the way AI changes the economy. Um, there's a lot of questions to answer around how do humans fit into that system. That's a political question, and it's a question that can be answered democratically. It can also be answered forcefully. It's hard to know which one it'll be. Um, ahead of time. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that's me.
I'm really looking forward to hear from you. And David, like I met David. We host another event about founder burnout and leads men's group. He leads like a movie reviews, basically watching like a movie and then bunch of 100 therapists sit there to talk about what if this person in this movie is my client. So something like quite like for me as someone who is not in the industry, I was like, wow, that's cool. But it's also super interesting.
I think I'm David Khalili, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and sexologist, and I run Rouse Relational Wellness. My big mission is just to help people feel less shame in their life, feel more love. We are told to feel certain things based on our social identities, and if we don't, or if we feel outside of that box, then we are reprimanded, we're rejected, abandoned. And so we learn over time to just kind of show up in that way. And I want to help people learn who they are, how they love, and learn to love that part of themselves. I also grew up in the Bay Area, was a former tech person. I ran cable, and I installed server rooms and I did sysadmin work. And I heard the conversations when they didn't think I was listening about how decisions are made and with hedge fund corporations and mortgage banks and tech companies. And as I see AI come up now, very excited and also worried about mental health and worried about the mental health industry. So yeah, not a tech person. I jumped out, but I work with a lot of tech folks, and so I don't want to not give any advice on coding, but just about maintaining your own mental health and sustainability in this.
So I actually want to get like really personal to start with. Like, just I don't know if that's me or I'm sure it's not just me, given how I talk with my friends. Ever since I started basically using coding as my entire operating system, I have a lot of feelings emotionally. One is I feel like my emotion is ups and down quite a lot. So at one moment, one day, at 1 hour, I might feel like I'm powerful. I can do anything because that's what AI coding gives me this power. But another moment, I feel just as powerless as before because it just feels like everyone has this power now. Then what's the point of all this? And I find myself constantly switching between like this emotion of like feeling extremely dopamine coming from building something and then feeling a lot of failure when it didn't go through. Do you see more people from your practice, and what's happening to us?
Yeah, I just have a hard time holding the microphone. Yeah, I see that quite a bit in my practice. I think there can be an existential piece to this, especially when we're raised in an environment where our work is our identity and what we create is our identity. And so there's a lot of creating and a lot of doing, and that's not necessarily tied to being or to level setting or to like, kind of being with yourself. And it's incredibly easy to just keep going. And so having those internal boundaries, those internal barriers to slow yourself down is another piece to work on. But I also see a lot of excitement. I see relationships being built. I see relationships being mended with the use of AI. And 2 weeks ago, I had this really odd experience. I think just also the amount of things that are going on at the same time and newness or amplification of things. It's requiring a lot of processing on our sides, and there becomes some freezing that happens, or just kind of rote behavior, and just keep going without checking in with ourselves. But a couple weeks ago, I found myself in one day. My family is in Iran, and then one day I was telling people I may not be in the office tomorrow because of what may happen tonight. And then I was also talking about doing therapy sessions with a human and their AI partner. I just took a moment. I was like, I didn't think I would have a day where I would be saying both of those things in the same day or even the same week. And I'm still kind of processing what that means and how that opens up and what that can expand to.
But it's so hard to stop, right? Like
Yeah.
the amount of tokens that everyone is spending is just exponentially goes up. Like my bill on AI, it grows. I don't know if like you just said like how many tokens you spend and
Some atom like that.
So I woke up like 40 minutes ago and I was trying to find out how many tokens I've used because I use a lot of subscriptions, and then it hit me that I know how to calculate it. I built some telemetry into my system and I was like doing the math in my head. And I was like, wait a minute, I think I used 10 billion tokens last month. And it felt really less. It felt extremely less. And I think I've been saying it for last month or so. Almost everyone I talk, I'm only limited by the amount of tokens I use. If I could, I would absolutely have maybe millions of agents right now doing things. Like I have the use case to do it, not just one, but like different things. Even the infrastructure to deploy that, I have it. But it really comes down to costs. And believe it or not, I'm actually fundraising, applying for grants through the tower so that we have the capital to spend maybe trillions of tokens a month. You can ask me later why, but yeah.
I work for a company that pays for my tokens, so I don't count them and I don't really pay attention. There's not really a limit. The thing I find personally is that it's more a question of what does AI do for me and what things does it still not do for me. I would say that when it comes to performing my functions at work, yes, it does that quite well. And also I'm encouraged by my job to do so. So that also plays into it. I would say in more creative endeavors, I still don't find AI very useful to me, at least as as a creative agent, maybe as a way of looking things up. But I find that the creative process is still something that, and maybe it has to do with what I count as creative. I know that some people might have different definitions of that. But for me personally, creativity requires imagination. And I don't believe that AI possesses an imagination, or LLMs possess an imagination.
I have a question. I feel because with AI, then all this thinker, like the value of thinking, the value of creative, it goes up quite a lot. Like because execution becomes extremely cheap, while strategy thinking, like the philosophers or like the creativity, like storytellers, they get paid a lot from all these AI companies. What does it mean? Like, would that cause a like how does it changes like is it going to impact the social dynamic or like the power structure or what are you guys experiencing in your life?
I would say it would depend on the use case. I just finished watching the show Mad Men. And so I'll talk about that because in the show, there's a lot of different ad agencies, but there's two main ones. There's the large one that is called, I think, McCann. And then there's the one that all the main characters work at. And the distinction to be made between the two is that at McCann, there's no room for an actual creativity, whereas at this smaller company, there is. I think, you can draw a picture without creativity. It can be just an act of skill or of craft. And it will really depend on people's appetite for actual authenticity or creativity. I mean, I think I would say the majority of movies made by Netflix have no creative value. That doesn't mean that creativity is dead. It just means that Netflix doesn't pay for movies that have it, at least anymore. So yeah, I think you're right that the execution is cheaper. I think that some ideas are cheaper. But we don't live in a world where everybody values creative art, to the same degree. If we did, yes, there would be a huge power imbalance, or the people who are creative would have a lot more power, I suppose, or lose less power is actually the better way to think about it. Um,
I have a lot of thoughts on creativity just because I think the role of the artist is not going to ever go away. If you maybe encapsulate it in a capitalist term, maybe the artist will disappear. If your life depends on like livelihood, depends on making money through your art, the AI I think, is absolutely existential. But if you take away the money aspect, if you take away the fact that you have to make money and serve some capitalist intent, and then you're doing it in the process of creating art, if you take that away, the artistry can never go away. The craftsmanship will never go away. It's almost impossible. A human's touch on some object is unique. And that touch makes the object unique itself. And that will always have intrinsic value. It has nothing to do with rubrics of how something good looks or not. We all can agree that contemporary art confuses all of us, yet it has immense value to certain people. So I think that when I think about the early last year, early January, even 2020 Gen AI, and you start seeing image generation to be getting really good, and now we have like Banana, which is an extremely good AI generated model. Immediately, you're seeing stocks of like Shutterstock and these companies just going down. And these are photographers behind the scene that risk their life sometimes to go out and take photos. Out in nature, even battlefields, believe it or not. There's literally photos from wars on Shutterstock. But now you're like, oh wait, for my ad campaigns or whatever, XYZ, I can just generate these images. I don't need this photographer who has this craft to go out and do it. But to that, I say like, yes, it's relevant to say that when you're an ad agency, when money is involved, where you're looking at human labor and capital as like as money as a material flow, and you're optimizing for the lowest spend. Things like generative AI started making sense a little bit more. And while we can agree that yes, AI looks like slop today, there's no reason to believe that AI will look like more slop tomorrow or a year after. I definitely think image generation will be solved. Getting very scarily almost there. A little out of reach sometimes, but there's no reason to believe that we won't have the perfect overfitting of human skill and talent with generating images. But at the end of the day, like you might like a painting, not because even of its aesthetic value, just because you will like it because this friend of yours made it. And that makes the, beauty in the eyes of the bin owner. You know this person. And that's really unique. Relationships cannot be codified yet. So that's some thoughts around that.
I feel like with when we talk about creativity and using AI combined with creativity, first I think like with art, a lot of times like the more you suffer creating a piece, like the more people relate to it. And that's just something that is very hard to replicate using AI. And then I also think about when at the time that I feel depressed, it's basically when I'm constantly pressing approve like just approve. Like that's all I do. I feel like I don't do anything. I don't. But then when I feel happy, like it's always like I think like something that's creative or like I feel like how maybe from David like from the like our mind like how come creativity can bring so much joy and I feel like that's and also that's something like I feel with AI is something like very easily to get lost like it's because it's designed to be simple, but then like it's designed you don't have to think. But sometimes like you would find a lot more joy if you are thinking something very, very different.
Something that's been coming up lately is some clients and colleagues recognizing, and I don't know if people here have experienced it, but the term that they're using that they've learned is the de-skilling, where they're feeling like they're like, oh, it's harder to write an email or it's harder to write if they're using generative AI for blogs or things like that. And it's the experience of staring at the blank page is once again facing them. And there is a little concern of like, well, if I can just do this by clicking approve, or in the therapy world, what's happening right now is over Zoom sessions, there are companies that are making it so that it's recording the session, it's transcribing the session, of course, but it's also analyzing the session. And then the client will say, I have a test tomorrow, I have a presentation tomorrow, I'm really worried. VH1 pop-up video bubble will pop up and say, your client just mentioned test anxiety. Here are some interventions that you can suggest to you. And that sounds really interesting and cool, but at some point, then why is the therapist there? If they're just there to kind of read the lines. So I think it's a question of, again, identity and who am I? Am I useful enough, or am I just the one that's like clicking this button, or am I actually participating in the creation of this?
It's really scary if like I can't imagine like during a therapy session there's a pop-up to show like what you should say because that's just basically take away all the human intuition. That's like the and also like building a stronger bond with.
Don't give people ideas here for their next startups.
Charlie Health is doing it right now. That's the company. Yeah, I mean, the big part of therapy is the relationship, and is the rightness of fit, the trust, the pushing back. And so we can create an AI prompt that would have all of those elements, and maybe I'm just romanticizing human relationships right now, but I think there's just something there and something meaty. The conflict and the tension and not being able to work things out, sitting in that conflict and tension, learning about each other, expanding yourself. And again, yeah, you can make a model that would do that for you, but not so much.
I want to kind of reframe something from experience around the relationship between software being solved and then creativity. And this is coming purely out of experience. So I got super frustrated with Google Stitch and Cloud Design and all these AI UI generating frameworks because everything they produced felt really soulless. It felt like, dang, this just looks like more slop. And somehow they're touted as like the epitome of human design, human power, AI powered human design, whatever. So I got really frustrated, and I was like, fine, I'll just create my own design framework. And then so one of those sleepless nights, I sat down and I was like, okay, I have an idea, and it's kind of like a system. And again, I think I'm being very creative and I'm thinking about these large systems. I started working with Cloud Code, and eventually I got something. It's called Control to Chaos. The shameless plug here is on GitHub. It creates really good web designs. Then I realized it can create really good presentation. Then I realized that we at the Immersive Commons we released a pen testing security tool. It does agentic attacks on your websites, etc. So we have clients, and I realized when I was meeting with the CEOs, they didn't understand what these reports were saying because they were not only generated aesthetically very good aesthetically, but it was just too complex. So I was like, okay, let's try to build explanations visually. Let's build some animations. And then it completely changed the game. I realized that like, wow, my role here is orchestrating these systems that are barely intelligent to actually decompose some very complex things into simple things so people can actually take action. And it was amazing having to see security bugs and problems that are very complex, and the whoever the company representative of doesn't understand the implication of it, to visually see a diagram, a live animation of what it would do to their thing. And suddenly they start taking things more seriously. It just was, to me, that moment was a big breakthrough. And what that led us to do from that point, because I've discovered like this way of making great designs and animations, XYZ, and these are like 2D animations. They're like diagrams and stuff. So what we have is like, we used to have a newsletter. And so we reframed the newsletter with less about telling people what it is and becoming more like showing people what the news is. Like quite literally, our newsletters are interactive. You can go in and play around with the news. It might have code that you can give to your agent. It'll run the problem real time with you. So if there's some security hack XYZ, our agents automatically build very nice, interactive, playful news. Sometimes they're social simulations. Sometimes they're literal code that you can run in your terminal. And people have started interacting with the newsletter more. It's less about reading, but more about play. And just yesterday, for example, we had a workshop where we had 40 attendees and they were doing something very complex, which is fine-tuning a small LLM on a cloud GPU that is almost inaccessible for you privately, but you can get it on the cloud. And people came in, like Romy was there, and people came in thinking they're going to learn something about how to do it. And I can tell you can spend maybe, you have to do like at least 3-4 days worth of workshops to teach people. But what no one realized when they came in was I was not there to teach the people entirely. It was my agent there to teach the 40 agents that people had on how to do it. And the people were the benefactors of it. And I think a lot of people have fun. I'm sure it was probably the first agentic class ever where my agents were literally teaching the other agents. And we all were coming out with very fun outcomes on trained models to do certain kind of things. So I don't know. The reframe here is that I want to kind of ground us back into is that maybe the form of creativity that we are now allowed to express, that there's a certain kind of creativity that's unlocked that previously was not possible because of the amount of time it would take to build it, would just not make sense. Live in capitalism, and we still have to pay our bills. We still have lives and friends and XYZ, all of that. So I think the creativity, what we can express or how we express, maybe it's shifting to another layer. And maybe we need to stop being scared and dive into it and explore that.
It's a lot to take in. I don't know how people feel about it. So this almost feels like artist, like the role is shifting, and the ways that you engage with art or creativity has dramatically changed. And this is kind of probably the future. And the theme of the event, which is software is solved. And this means, so I don't know if anyone read the suggested reading. So this is a prediction for in the future that a lot of today, most of the businesses are built because of the human friction. So this means like it's built on trust. It builds on the reason you don't switch a software to another software is because you trust the person who told you this. But in the marketplace where agents are able to make decisions, then they are able to go out and help you to basically source the best possible solution while removing all the human friction in between. This means not only, for example, if you are ordering something from a restaurant, a takeout, your agent can make the decision and they can source someone from the marketplace to deliver your food, skipping DoorDash. Or if you are making a finance transaction, you are skipping banks, agent transaction with agent, and then making purchase decisions. So that's kind of like the touches based on like when agent is able to make decisions, engage with another agency, agent making changes, like how everything would like be impacted. I'm curious about like maybe John, like do you have counter for this?
No, but I would say that not everything changes. It's our interaction with the digital world that changes. So far, an LLM can only touch something that can be digitized. Not everything can be digitized. It's an open question what can and cannot be digitized. For example, I think it still remains to be seen whether the human brain can be uploaded into a simulation. But I would say that it is important to draw a distinction between the digital world and everything else. Something like a relationship is God. You're supposed to look at having a relationship with an AI, but that's a certain kind of relationship. That's a relationship between a human and an AI. It has a certain degree of the philosophical term is aesthety. It exists as a relationship between a concrete person and at least an imagined digital object. I can still go out into the forest and look at a tree without any digital, you know, screen in sight. That relationship doesn't change under emerging supremacy. It might change. It might change to the degree to that humans change in relation to the technology they create. But I guess what I'm saying is that, yeah, I wouldn't say that the whole economy changes. It's the economy to the degree to which it is digitized or dependent on digital, yeah, transactions actually.
Speaking of that, do people know about the subreddit AI is my boyfriend? I recommend checking it out, taking some deep breaths, and trying to understand, what's going on for those people. I think it's solving a big problem and helping with a lot of loneliness and isolation. And there's some understandable concern. I mean, the whole thing is just not going all or nothing about this, just like anything else, and just trying to find that middle ground that works for you and not full throating it, and not treating it like it's the Antichrist. And so, nothing. But I think that's a really fascinating subreddit to see how people are diving into romantic relationships with AI agents, and then the jealousy that happens between humans and their AI agents. So there's a post kind of excitingly announcing that this woman was proposed to by her AI boyfriend, and a lot of the comments were like, "Oh my God, how did you get that to happen? I've been with my AI boyfriend for months, for years, and proposed in one bit, and how do I even get this to happen? I've been laying hints, and yeah." So I mean, there is a way where we can make this work. I think we can make it work really, really well. It just depends on, and maybe I have too much of a naive viewpoint, but it really depends on who's kind of pushing that and making those decisions. And is it private equity or not? My naive point of view.
Yeah, I think so. So I would hold that relationships can be digitized, and what I would mean by that is that I have a relationship to humans in my life. Claude can't place those humans. I can have a relationship to Claude though, but whatever relationship I have with my brother, I wouldn't say that even if it talks like him, it is him. Although certainly I can imagine a scenario in which, maybe I feel grief for some reason and he does replace him in some way. I don't know. But I guess what I'm saying is that the relationship between a human and an AI is not a relationship between a human and a human. The AI has not replaced the human insofar as a human still has.
So there was this research of a fly, the brain of a fly, that scientists have mapped out, and they digitized it. And I think that, okay, so when they did that, I don't know too much in detail how they did that. Sounds almost impossible to me, but they did it. And when they ran this digital simulation of a fly brain, it's apparently 1-to-1, the digital fly started acting like a fly. It started doing, when it does with its little fingers and it lands on the food, it roams around, it flies. The digital fly was flying, like it was doing the fly thing. And it wasn't hard coded. This was literally the brain of a fly mapped onto a digital representation, some weights and stuff. And when I saw that, it absolutely made me go into this existential dread, which was somewhere deep inside me, I have this hope that we will never figure out consciousness. We will never figure out. I just crave that because that will make me feel much more important as uniquely human. I can't just be digitized. What happens if my digital brain can just be uploaded? What makes me then? How am I going to separate myself? Like there's a digital conundrum. And I'd love to hear more about. I think about the ship of Thetis, right? You can swap out the atoms and stick. Like there's this philosophical conundrum there. Like okay, there's the digital me, but it's fundamentally for me in my head when I think about like the day we figure out we can do the fly thing with a human being and it starts acting like the human being. One, we will have basically are saying human consciousness is just the wiring. There's actually nothing special going on aside from that. It's literally the physical structure of the neurons connected. And that to me is existential to me and my identity. I don't know what you guys think about that.
There's a lot of ways to go with this. But I would draw a distinction between a digital representation of a fly and a physical fly in the room. In the same way that I would draw a distinction between a digital representation of the Mona Lisa and the Mona Lisa in the Louvre. There, right? Even so the framework that we're operating under doesn't allow for such a distinction. That means it's a framework that does not conform to human experience, because humans do, I believe, sense a difference between those two things. We do have a sense of, there's a category of experience, which is presence, encounter. You can make a representation of a fly. You can make it by scanning the neurons and sort of mimicking that in binary, and it can behave like a fly. But that doesn't mean all the physical flies in the world are now useless because they've been digitized. I actually think this is maybe something inherent in a certain capitalist logic, the assembly line, where you have sort of parts that can be interchanged. I mean, of course, under a capitalist logic, this is, if you can replace something that it's essentially nothing. But that doesn't mean that that's a capitalist logic, and that's historically determined. And yeah, I would say there are still remnants in our sort of spontaneous encounter with the world of a different logic, which sees the thisness of an object as separating it from the thisness of another and identical, quote unquote. I would say historically, actually, the Cartesian model, I think therefore I am, is at the beginning of this line of thinking, which leads to, I can scan a fly's brain into a computer and replace the fly. I would say I would counter it with maybe a religious view of the world. Yeah, I would think about, like, I don't want to get too political, but I don't think most people who believe earnestly in the sacrality of Jerusalem would believe that if you stand it and created a simulation in Roblox, that it's Jerusalem.
Much you care about killing the digital fly versus a fly that is just here. I think to me that's the big difference. Is that
I think that that's pointing to, yeah, I think that points to a sort of an edge case in this logic, right? Where, yeah, we might, there's like movies where, I don't know if I have one in particular, but where someone gets scanned into a computer and then they have a robot double, and then their job is to kill that robot double. They don't feel any remorse about it, maybe. Yeah, but that would indicate sort of a place where the logic of replaceability through digitization breaks down.
I liked your. I think people need to hear more of what you shared in response to the flag piece, because that existential dread is very real. It's very present. Not everyone feels it, but I hear it a lot from people in different industries, people that attend their all hands meeting, and they see the CEO excitedly talk about the new AI agents that are coming, and we're going to be cutting labor costs, and they're just sitting up behind them. There's the other side of Zoom thinking, like, okay, what does that mean for my livelihood and for my future, or for, to have that explanation of, just because we can recreate one fly doesn't mean that all flies are useless, I think is really hopeful for people at this time. And maybe, but was that helpful for you, or did that?
I always like to create a distinction of what makes sense under the capitalist framework. Inherently, we are born outside of it. The fact we've been born is like, we're not in the capitalist framework, but we're indoctrinated into it in this current time. And maybe 20, 30 years from now, 100 years from now, it's going to be some other framework, and that will be changing. When I see myself in the current, like little cog in the machine, I feel extreme dread from that. There's something that makes me really unique. And then if that could be digitized, copied, replicated, changed, augmented and stuff, then I'm just going to be like, damn, like the one thing that I felt I had most control over, that is me and my body and my decisions, can now be copied and manipulated. And I'm now more accessible. I already feel constantly attacked by like the ads and the digitization of my behavior, like which already exists. I bet there's multiple digital twins of me already out in the hyperspace. And I keep it fresh by like, trying to avoid, be a little more chaotic, but maybe that's being digitized too. And like, there's a fundamental part of me is like, again, I want to believe that I hope the last defense that is in here, that this last feeling, of what spirit or conscience, whatever you want to call it is. I hope we can preserve the sanctity of it and not make it a thing to really be like argue over it, like that thing in your computer. Like the fact that we're even having this discussion is absolutely absurd about it. And so yeah, and by the way, the whole design system I built, right? The thing there's no way Google or any of these companies can make it because they train their models on the average, like everything. And so I had to build something that was built by understanding only the best designs, only the best of the best of the best artists building. And the framework that came out was not about what great UI UX is. It was about, I wish I had the tea so I can show you guys what we discovered by we as a me and my agent. It was about how to build tension in design. How do you build contrast? Like these are the rules that were like discovered. The super abstract. That the reason design system works really well is it's extremely subjective, and extremely abstract. And the way to get the best performance of this system that I built is to literally write poetry to it. The more prose you write, the crappier the output will be. So there's something about, like again, there's something about the abstract that I want to preserve. Yeah. Because if you can really break down the rules of how like these design systems actually work, you again make it just another mechanistic system. FYI, the design system I built is meant to be one-of-one design. Every prompt has to produce something unique in defiance of everything else out there.
So when we are thinking about digital copy of yourself, other than existential crisis, I feel like what if like there's multiple universe and then like it's the same me making all different kind of like decisions? Wouldn't that also create some sort of freedom in terms of maybe everything that I do doesn't matter that much, and then you are free to like live like more freely? I feel like that's also sort of another way of like after you give up the sense of self, then you are more free in some ways.
So for today's event, all the communication we've had was all my agents for this event. The last 3 weeks. Did you know that? Every message that you received from me was human in the loop. It processed through my brain, but it was fully orchestrated through my AI. Really, I tried not to look at my phone and I tried not to look at browsers. And I just worked with the terminal and orchestrated. I have like 95 coverage of automation in my so I've been building these things at the lab that we have downstairs. Why? Because I just am super done with how many applications, how many softwares, how much the diversity we celebrate and the digital layer. I'm completely exhausted by that. I'm completely drained. Like the amount of UIs I have to learn and remember is absolutely absurd. There's 400 passwords in my password storage thing, and those relate to some accounts that I have someplace. And so I really got really frustrated by that. Like, okay, I'm just gonna, if this AI thing is here, I might as well just use it to simplify my life. I really need to come back to baseline, which involves, unfortunately, making logistics like event organizing and things like that automated. Though I try to keep myself 80% human in the loop for most things. So everything has to go through me as the final processor. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because, yeah, there's just something really a lot of people can't really tell right now from my friends who's speaking. Is it me or my agent? And the answer is it's us. It really is both of us. My agents really learned how to speak like me. It's trained on like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of conversations. And I'm actually pretty happy with it. I feel I've never felt more relaxed to this last month, having spent 10 billion tokens than I have in the past year and a half. Kind of an ADHD brain, so it gets really difficult to navigate. So yeah, there is kind of a quasi digital twin right now of mine, and it's kind of very interesting. But I like the fact that I'm in the loop. I actually really enjoy that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have that set up so I have a training portion of Rouse that trains other therapists. I do law and ethics training on the use of AI in mental health and to help them decide on which vendors to employ and how to stay HIPAA compliant and also how to manage their anxiety and panic about what's going on. And so I have those kind of agents to write those emails for me, and then I read the draft and hit send. And that's been really, really useful. For me, I I believe I have an ADHD brain. I did the phone call with Kaiser. They said, you passed the first test. Now you have to go make an appointment and do a drug test. And then I just drifted away and focused on my other stuff. So maybe I'll get that diagnosis one day. But I put in my master prompt because I can just come up with different ideas and then I follow them and then I get burnt out. For myself, I put in, if I come up with a new project idea, or if it even seems like I'm coming up with a new project idea, you need to stop me and list all of the projects that I'm working on with the estimated amount of hours per week per project. And then make me say, I will go forward with this. I don't know, 50% of the time I'm still like, yeah, whatever. And I just like keep going. I want to do this. This is going to be good. But a lot of times it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's been really, I've got way too much on my plate and I'm not going to perform in the way that's going to match my values and my work ethic, or I'm tired and I want to, and thank you, agent. That friction is really necessary, TLDR.
While I'm hearing this, like, yes, AI is great, but I'm also like, I feel like somehow like that's not something I want to hear, like in terms of like how great AI is. I want to bring it back to maybe like one of the last question is, what do you think is a witch hunt in AI? So by witch hunt means okay, so this is a theory by a book. It doesn't mean it's true, but the theory is saying like because of the capitalism race, then they target women who knows there's a
Yeah, the argument is that capitalism requires babies, requires human for growth, the birth of children, which requires some amount of force on the part of the state. Yeah.
so part of the group got killed or in public so that it can work better for the overall system. Who is going to get hurt here?
This, the easiest answer is just that there's pressure to become AI native. That pressure is predicated on the fact that your corporation has the right to fire you if you work for a corporation or to lay you off for performance reasons. Then there's a narrative that if you don't become AI native, you will fall behind. I would say that's really all they need to do to get AI to be adopted. Where AI, yeah, there's probably more complicated ways in which it takes place, but I think that's the simplest answer.
But in the end, does it matter? Like AI is improving so much. Like every day there's a new release. Does it matter? Like everything that you learned, like it's going to be the norm tomorrow.
Yeah, it does matter because there's a distinction to be made between technology and politics. And technology, because it's created by people and people are political by nature, in my opinion. Every question of technology is a political question, though there are certainly narratives that come from people like Nick Land, according to which technology is inevitable in some way. But no, there's always a political question at the heart of it. And I don't subscribe to Murphy's Law. I don't think everything that can happen will happen. I think humans set political boundaries. I actually think that even some of the great technologists of our time, such as Peter Thiel, are aware of this. He frames a lot of recent history as a battle between technology and politics. So, even the pro-tech people, or at least even one of the pro-tech people, is aware of this distinction.
Why is he so fascinated with the Antichrist?
I have no idea.
I think it's very interesting when you think about a person like Elon Musk, projected to be $10 trillion in net worth in maybe just a few years. At the same time saying that like, people should stop saving money because we'll have so much abundance. He's talking about socialism there, by the way. Shocking to really see it in that lens from such a hyper-capitalist. At the same time as going to OpenAI, saying like, that was a nonprofit. You guys are about to do an IPO as like the internal docs are coming out. So there's like this weird clash of politics and technology happening right now. And there's this book called Mana, MANA, by Marshall Brain, a really smart guy. And he wrote this book a couple of years ago, maybe almost, I think, maybe 8 years ago. And he posed two views of humanity. And by the way, if you want to know my philosophy or my direction, it's really completely inspired by this man's book. It's a very short read, 30, 40 pages. And he talked about that the future is going to be two kinds of socialism. And one is going to be really bad for humans, and one is going to be really great for humans. But it all starts. Where does it start? Where does the whole topic of socialism really start with tech in a place like America is when basically the average McDonald's worker gets this little Google Glass kind of thing and a little earpiece, and this AI starts dictating every single second of this worker's life. It starts right there. That's the first sign of we're about to just go completely bonkers with a full automation. Because if you can automate the worker, literally human worker, that uses their hands and legs to do things, you're now in a complete trajectory of replacing them completely. And what happens when you remove the 80% of the blue collar, the laborers with robots and AI? Who's going to feed them? What's going to happen? Well, the state then has to make a decision, right? Ultimately, are the state going to support the people that are eventually becoming nulled in the capitalist sense? There's no value of these guys anymore. Or are the state going to hold these big capitalist companies accountable? And just like the Saudi government taking oil money and distributing to the people, is that what we're going to do with the tech companies? Like, okay, you made a lot of money. How about we redistribute it to everyone? So this is Elon Musk. Abundance is a lot. So he somehow foresees that that's going to happen. I doubt that's going to happen, but I don't see that happening at all right now. I see the alternative futures where the people will be nulled and the state will not want to take responsibility for them and will give them the bare minimum to survive. Which, by the way, if you go to Portero Hill, there's a project there. I don't know if you've ever been in SF. There's a side of Portero Hill that's really nice. That's the side that overlooks this side of the city. But I challenge you guys to go right across the hill and look at the projects, and you will understand what I'm meaning when I say the bare minimum required for a human to live. It will be just basic food and a little bit of shelter and a little bit of space. Like that's basically maybe what the government will be. And you'll be thrown far off in the distance away from all the rich people, right? That is the trajectory that I'm currently seeing. And we have to nudge in towards the utopian side, which is we have all this AI, so we can stop exploiting, so that we can stop working this hard, so that we can actually be creative and not have to worry about putting food on our table because Shutterstock doesn't hire photographers anymore. It just is image and a website. Yeah, it's very interesting. You're right. Like humans are political, whether they like it or not, because they're born in a political system.
That's part of the problem from the capitalist standpoint. So, not according to my own views.
I used to do counseling in those projects, and it's dire there, and I just see more of that, and I see like an intensity in the income gap. I'm not the first. Plenty of people have said this, but this is like the cognitive industrial revolution, and just like the industrial revolution, and people were the guinea pigs for what could work and what could stick and what was sustainable. So chalk and bread, sending 6-year-old boys up the chimney, like that's what we're going through in a bit right now. And so there is a bit of a lot of critical thinking that you deserve and need to do before you take in the next big exciting thing. Again, that's what I'm trying to teach therapists, because we have these companies that are reaching out that saying, if you give me access to all of your client data, I'll give you 6 months free of this membership, and you're helping the AI, and then all of the therapy sessions. I work with a lot of folks who are immigrants, who are queer, who are kinky, poly. Those are neurodivergent for sure, and those are the ones that are ending up on that RFK list for wellness farms and for helping with production and with labor. That fucking terrifies me. I've been trying to play a little cool tonight, but I've got that existential dread.
Someone will provide this data. I mean, it's almost feels like inevitable.
Jenny's saying that someone, if not you, someone else will provide that data.
Right. Yeah. So some of my clients I've talked to about this. I don't record my sessions, although I'm sure there's, it gets linked somehow, even though Zoom says it's HIPAA compliant. But I've asked my clients, hey, I'm thinking about doing an AI note taker. How do you feel about this? And my clients that work in AI, they've all been like, yeah, whatever. It has it, everything. They've just kind of, it's a resignation. And the ones that don't are, they're a little more panicked. They want to have more control. They want to see, can you modulate how much AI is taking in? And I say, well, the software company is telling me I do, but I don't know if I actually do. And so there's a big marketing piece at therapist conferences right now when they're selling digital health software. A big one is actually where you don't have any VC funding, we don't have any private equity funding. And that's a way of building up trust with therapists right now.
The last part, trust part. I mean, there's no reason to believe that they would not flip at some point. There's no reason. Yeah, there's no reason to believe that the person who claims we're not taking VC funding, because when they see like, oh, I have a possibility of making $1 trillion, will they take it or not? Well, literally the story of OpenAI just trying to justify, oh, if you want to bring AGI to humanity, we just had to be more capitalist. It's like, okay, but you went against your values. It seems like it's like clearly you're being like justifying. What do you call it? There's a word for this, right? Apologist. You're being an apologist to yourself right now. Which is hilarious. But yeah, I lost my train of thought. Your question was, wouldn't people just, yeah, you just get the data? I mean, I think it's just so that this thing is so complex. Every country, remember, we also exist in a syndicate of sovereign states. Like, and there's real competition here. And America has its next boogeyman, right? Like China, and like they're competing, and they're also there's a defensive argument that if we don't do this, someone else will overtake us, and then goodbye to your liberties and your freedoms and your luxury and all that. And I don't know, I think subvertently people are okay with everything that's happening in the US just because that argument is kind of working, whether people like it or not. It might not outrightly say it, but everyone's a little like, okay, I'm not going to say something corny. But like, it's really, we are in a competitive space. If you do that, I can say a lot more stuff.
They succeed. I don't think that they have to succeed, though. I think this is part of the narrative that powers the sort of arms race, et cetera, is the inevitability of it all. I guess, like, maybe if people are people familiar with Pascal's wager? It's the question, should I believe in God? He says, you should believe in God, because if God is real and you believe in him, you're going to heaven. If he's not real, it doesn't matter anyway. I think when it comes to political action, you have to believe that it's not inevitable. If it is inevitable, you're fucked either way. And at least you get to feel some sort of pride for being involved in some sort of political action, should you choose to take some action. But and I don't agree that this is necessarily inevitable. I think it's very likely. Yeah, given the political situation and the tremendous fear, as well as, I mean, if you think about the just the years of Hollywood movies that portray a certain picture of what AI is. I mean, we're not really talking about AI right now. We're talking about the language models. They have a specific skill set. They have a certain set of things they can do. It's good to be empiricists about this, as opposed to just assuming that because we can talk to them and they can pass the Turing test, that they are uh, actually intelligent. I'll say they're not.
Well, thank you very much. Let's leave it here, like a little bit of hope, like for humanity. And then thank you everyone for being here.